welcome to the channel. This story is based on documented true events, retold for Horror Night Stories. In 2011, a quiet, working-class neighborhood in the heart of Indiana became the center of one of the strangest documented hauntings in modern American history. For months, a small rental house sat at the center of investigations involving police officers, priests, doctors, and state welfare officials, each of whom walked away with the same uneasy question: what exactly had taken hold of the Ammons family? At first glance, the small home on Carolina Street looked perfectly ordinary. Beige paint faded under the Midwestern sun, a narrow driveway leading to a detached garage, and a small patch of grass that refused to grow evenly. It was the kind of house most people drove past without a second thought. But inside, something unseen had already begun to make itself known. LaToya Ammons, a mother of 3, had moved into the house with her children and her mother, Rosa. They were looking for a fresh start. Money was tight, and the house, rented from a local landlord, was one of the few affordable options in the area. The first few weeks passed quietly, though Rosa often complained about an odd heaviness in the air. "It feels like someone's watching us," she said once. LaToya laughed it off. Everyone feels uneasy in a new house. But the unease didn't fade, it grew. It started small. One night, LaToya woke to the sound of steady footsteps echoing through the hallway. She assumed it was one of the kids, but when she checked their rooms, each child was asleep. She shrugged it off. Old houses creaked. Pipes moaned. But the next night, the sound came again, and this time there was a second noise, like a slow dragging, as if someone were pulling something heavy across the floor. Rosa began to notice strange wet footprints appearing in the living room, human-shaped but small, child-sized. Each time she wiped them away, they came back, sometimes dry, sometimes damp, leading nowhere. The doors began to rattle at night. The sound of whispering filled the hallway, faint but unmistakable. No words, just the murmuring of several voices too low to make out. By early February, the atmosphere in the home had shifted entirely. The air felt heavy, oppressive. The children started having nightmares. The youngest, 7-year-old Jaden, told his grandmother that shadow people were coming into his room at night. He said they stood near his bed and whispered his name. When Rosa asked what they said, he shook his head. "They don't talk like us," he said. "They talk inside my head." Rosa told LaToya, who dismissed it as childish imagination. But she couldn't ignore the growing tension in the house. The lights flickered constantly. The family heard loud knocks from inside the walls. Sometimes, the knocks would answer them, 3 short raps whenever someone spoke aloud about leaving. Still, they stayed. They didn't have anywhere else to go. The first real incident happened late one April night. Rosa woke up gasping for air. She said it felt like hands were pressing against her throat. She stumbled to her daughter's room, tears streaming down her face. LaToya found her mother's neck covered in faint red marks. They called it stress, anxiety, maybe an allergic reaction. But later that same night, they heard a deep growl coming from the children's room. Not an animal sound. Something guttural, resonant, like a voice struggling to form words. When LaToya ran to the room, she found the children standing on their beds, screaming. The closet door was swinging open and shut by itself, slamming so violently that plaster cracked along the frame. Rosa grabbed her Bible and began praying out loud. The slamming stopped immediately. They moved the children to sleep in the living room that night. No one slept. Over the following week, the activity escalated. Crosses fell from the walls. Objects slid across the kitchen counter without being touched. Rosa once saw a dark mass form in the corner of her eye. She turned, and it darted up the wall like smoke sucked into a vent. Then came the flies, hundreds of them. It was January, too cold for insects. Yet the windowsills, kitchen counters, and even the bathroom mirror were covered with small, black flies. The family swatted and sprayed, but by morning they'd be back. The landlord claimed it was plumbing related. LaToya doubted that. The smell began soon after. A thick, foul stench that rose from the basement. It smelled of rot and iron. Rosa refused to go down there anymore, saying it made her dizzy. LaToya started hearing whispers near the basement stairs, always when she was alone. Sometimes, a single word repeated again and again. Stay. By spring, LaToya's children had begun behaving strangely. The youngest boy talked to invisible figures in the corners of rooms. The middle child, 9-year-old Adam, would wake screaming at night, claiming someone was sitting on his chest. The oldest, a 12-year-old girl, became withdrawn, staring blankly for hours at a time. Teachers noticed changes too. Blank stares, sudden outbursts, muttering to themselves. A social worker was eventually assigned after one of the children fainted at school. When she visited the home, she reported feeling a presence. Her notes described sudden chills, the smell of decay, and a black shadow that seemed to pass behind her as she interviewed Rosa in the kitchen. She requested a police wellness check. When 2 officers arrived later that week, both reported strange phenomena: wet footprints appearing on the floor, an oily residue dripping down a bedroom window, and one officer's radio shorting out repeatedly. One of them joked nervously, "I think you've got a ghost, ma'am." But when he stepped into the basement, his flashlight died instantly. He left and refused to return. That's when LaToya reached out to her church. The local priest visited briefly, sprinkling holy water and saying prayers. He told her to clean the house, remove all objects that might attract darkness. She did. The disturbances continued. It was during one of these visits that something happened, an event later mentioned in police and social worker reports, that turned skepticism into fear. While sitting in the living room, the youngest boy began to growl, his eyes rolling back. Then, in front of witnesses, he lifted off the floor, just a few inches, but long enough for everyone to see. When he fell, he screamed words no one could understand, guttural and broken, like several voices at once. The room erupted in chaos. The witnesses fled outside. Later that night, Rosa said the basement door opened on its own. She swore she heard laughter echoing up from below. Part 2, the investigation. In the weeks following the levitation incident, word spread quietly through town. Neighbors began whispering about the Carolina Street house. Some said they'd seen strange lights flickering in the windows at night. Others claimed they heard cries echoing from the basement when no one was home. But most avoided the property altogether, crossing the street rather than walking past it. For LaToya and Rosa, each day felt heavier than the last. They tried to live normally, school, work, church, but the nights always brought new horrors. The children's health deteriorated. They became pale, withdrawn, and restless. Doctors prescribed medication for anxiety, but nothing changed. Rosa began documenting the events in a small notebook, recording dates, times, and descriptions. Later, these notes would become part of the official case file. On April 23, 2012, the situation reached a breaking point. That afternoon, a caseworker named Valerie and a nurse visited the home to check on the children. The family was seated in the living room when the youngest boy suddenly began to hiss and bare his teeth. His eyes rolled back, and he started to growl, a low, animalistic sound that made everyone in the room freeze. Valerie later described what she saw next in her written report. The boy began to lift from the floor. His body rose backward onto the wall, sliding up until he was standing on the vertical surface, his feet flat against it. He then moved upward approximately 5 feet, paused, and flipped over his grandmother, landing on his feet behind her. The nurse screamed. Valerie grabbed Rosa and ran out of the house. The boy followed, now calm, asking, "Why are you scared?" When police arrived minutes later, they found the family outside. Rosa clutched her Bible, whispering prayers. The officers interviewed everyone separately. Their statements were consistent. Valerie's report later circulated through the department, where it was quietly labeled, "Unexplained phenomenon witnessed by multiple adults." It was no longer just a family story. It was now part of a public record. The next day, LaToya met with Father Thomas, a local priest known for handling spiritual disturbances. He listened carefully, took notes, and asked permission to visit the house. That weekend, he arrived with 2 parish assistants and a bottle of holy water. As soon as they entered, one of the assistants said she felt dizzy. Her hands began to tremble. Father Thomas moved from room to room, praying softly. He reported later that each room had a distinct temperature drop, especially the children's bedroom. The air there was several degrees colder than elsewhere. When he reached the basement, he stopped speaking mid-prayer. "There's something down here," he said. Rosa led him to a section of the basement where the concrete floor had been broken. Just a small area near the foundation. She explained that the previous tenant had left it that way. Father Thomas knelt and said the air felt charged, like static before lightning. He sprinkled holy water, and all present claimed to hear a deep groan echoing through the pipes. He told LaToya he believed the house was cursed or possibly the site of a ritual. Whatever was called here, he said, was never sent away. He recommended a full exorcism, but diocesan rules required approval from higher authorities. That process could take weeks. Meanwhile, the family remained in the house. Days turned into nights filled with pounding on walls, unexplained scratches appearing on the children's skin, and voices calling from the basement. The smell of decay returned stronger than ever. Once, Rosa said, she saw a tall figure with glowing eyes standing behind the furnace. When she blinked, it was gone. But its shape lingered as a shadow burned into the wall. The police began treating the case as a disturbance call, visiting several times. One officer, skeptical but curious, brought along his personal voice recorder. In the basement, he asked aloud, "Is anyone here with us?" When he played the recording back later that evening, there was a faint response, a single word whispered in a low tone, "Mine." The officer, normally calm, refused to enter the house again. By mid-May, the family had moved temporarily to a relative's home, but the strange events followed. Rosa saw dark shapes moving in mirrors. LaToya woke at night feeling someone sit on her bed. The children continued to complain about voices calling their names. Desperate, she called Father Thomas again, pleading for help. He began performing unofficial blessings weekly. During one session, the eldest child began convulsing violently, speaking in what sounded like Latin. The priest shouted prayers while Rosa held the child down. After several minutes, the convulsions stopped. The girl blinked slowly and whispered, "He's not gone." When asked who she meant, she simply said, "The man in the basement." The news began to leak through local circles. A journalist caught wind of the police reports and contacted the department. The responding officers confirmed the incidents off record, but refused to discuss details. Word spread online under titles like The Haunted House of Indiana. One evening, a local television crew parked near the house, hoping for footage. They left less than 30 minutes later shaken. Their camera batteries drained inexplicably, and one microphone melted its cable. They aired a short segment titled, Unexplained Activity at Carolina Street Home. The house became a local legend overnight. Father Thomas finally received diocesan approval to conduct an official exorcism on LaToya herself. He explained that sometimes attachment begins with a location but moves to a person. He described her symptoms: sudden mood changes, speaking unknown languages, aversion to religious symbols, and the request was granted. On June 10th, the first official rite took place inside the church. LaToya sat quietly as the priest began reading prayers in Latin. Witnesses said the temperature dropped suddenly. She began coughing, then screaming, her voice overlapping into two tones at once, one deep, one normal. Father Thomas pressed forward, reading louder, invoking the name of Christ. After nearly an hour, LaToya fell limp. The priest declared the session complete. But the activity didn't stop. The next day, Rosa called him crying. The basement lights had turned on by themselves at 3:00 a.m. When she went to turn them off, she found footprints, wet and bare, leading to the center of the floor. The broken section of concrete appeared freshly disturbed, as if something beneath had been moving. Father Thomas returned with 2 church members and a police officer he trusted. Together, they decided to dig slightly at the broken area. Just beneath the surface, they found several small items: a woman's press on nail, a set of children's socks, a dark stained t-shirt, and a black figurine with horns. The priest burned the objects outside while reciting prayers. That night was the quietest the house had been in months. However, silence didn't last. Within a week, Rosa reported hearing crying in the walls again. LaToya dreamed of a tall shadow standing at the foot of her bed. The children began talking to the man again, saying he was angry about what was taken from the basement. When Father Thomas heard this, he advised them to move out permanently. But moving wasn't simple. The family had few financial resources, and the landlord refused to terminate the lease without payment. Eventually, after church intervention, they managed to relocate to a small apartment across town. For the first few weeks, the new place felt peaceful. No noises, no footprints, no shadows. The children began smiling again. Rosa started cooking full meals without fear. LaToya began sleeping through the night for the first time in months. They thought it was over. Midway through the story, you'd naturally transition to a mid-video viewer prompt for YouTube. Here's how it will blend naturally in the narration. If you're still listening, make sure to subscribe to Horror Night Stories for more true horror cases like this one. These stories are told exactly as they were documented. Real reports, real witnesses, and events that defy logic. Now let's continue. The piece would last only 34 days. One evening, LaToya returned home from work to find the apartment door unlocked. Inside, everything looked untouched, except for the living room table. On it sat a single muddy footprint, perfectly centered, small and bare. The same size as the ones that had appeared in the Carolina Street house. And beneath it, written in faint black dust, were 2 words, "Still here." Rosa collapsed when she saw it. The children began crying. LaToya called Father Thomas again, who told her to stay somewhere else that night. She did. But the next morning, when she went back to collect clothes, she found the footprint gone, and in its place, a cracked photo frame. Inside was a picture of her family, faces scratched out by something sharp. Part 3, The Return. After the incident with the footprint, Latoya tried to convince herself it was coincidence. Perhaps her children playing a prank, or dust that resembled a footprint. But deep down, she knew what she'd seen. The message wasn't symbolic, it was personal. Still here. The words echoed in her mind for days. Rosa refused to go back to the apartment, insisting that the spirit, or whatever it was, had followed them. She started sleeping at her sister's house, while Latoya and the children stayed with a family friend. At night, the children tossed and turned, whispering in their sleep. The middle child began talking to someone invisible again, mumbling phrases that made no sense. When Latoya asked who he was talking to, he said, "The man. He says we can't leave. He says the house is still his." She recorded this on her phone and showed it to Father Thomas the next day. The priest frowned deeply and said something she hadn't expected. "Whatever was in that house has attached itself to one of you. It's not tied to a place anymore. It's tied to the family." He asked her to keep daily notes of every strange event. The following week, her entries described doors opening by themselves, cold spots appearing in the hall, and a voice calling her name late at night. Once, she saw a black shadow pass behind her reflection in the bathroom mirror, even though there was no one else in the room. On July 3rd, Father Thomas returned, this time with official permission to conduct a major exorcism. The rarest type, reserved for extreme cases. It would be performed privately, without cameras or outsiders. The ritual took place in a small church meeting room. Latoya sat in a wooden chair, her mother and priest beside her. A few witnesses later claimed that as the prayers began, the lights flickered and the room temperature dropped. For nearly 2 hours, Father Thomas read from the Ritual Romanum. He asked the entity to identify itself. There was no verbal response, but Latoya's expression changed, her eyes glazed, and a faint smile crept across her face. Then she whispered something under her breath. "You can't take what was promised." The priest pressed the crucifix to her forehead and continued. Moments later, Latoya began coughing violently, then slumped forward. Rosa caught her before she fell. When she awoke minutes later, she claimed she remembered nothing, but she said she felt lighter. Father Thomas warned that the process might require repetition, that evil rarely left willingly after a single expulsion. He urged them to strengthen their faith, attend church regularly, and avoid speaking about the events. For a time, it seemed to work. Throughout late summer, the family's life slowly normalized. The children returned to school, and Rosa volunteered at a local food pantry. Latoya found part-time work nearby. The strange noises and sightings stopped completely. For the first time in nearly a year, peace seemed possible, but quiet doesn't always mean safety. In early September, Rosa found an old photo while unpacking boxes from the old house. A photo she didn't remember taking. It showed the Carolina Street living room, empty except for a black shape standing by the window. It wasn't human, shaped exactly, more like smoke forming a figure. The photo had no date stamp, no reflection of who took it. That night, Rosa dreamed of the same window. A figure stood behind it, motionless, waiting. She woke up gasping for air. The next morning, she burned the photo in the sink. As the paper curled and turned to ash, the smoke from it seemed thicker than normal, darker, almost oily. When the flame went out, the air smelled faintly of sulfur. That same evening, the knocking returned. At first, it came from the ceiling, light, rhythmic taps. Then from inside the walls. The family ignored it, hoping it would fade. Instead, It grew louder, spreading through every corner of the apartment. On the fourth night, the knocks turned into bangs. One came from the closet, so loud it shook the door frame. Rosa shouted a prayer and threw open the door. Nothing was there, but the air was freezing, her breath visible even though the house heater was on. The next morning, the youngest boy woke with deep scratches across his back, thin, straight lines as if drawn by claws. The doctor said it was self-inflicted. Latoya disagreed. She'd been awake all night beside him. When Father Thomas heard, he sighed heavily. "It's back," he said. "I don't think it ever left." He scheduled another blessing that weekend. During the blessing, witnesses described hearing faint footsteps pacing around the room as the priest prayed. A framed photo fell from the wall, glass shattering across the floor. One of the candles went out by itself. The priest's assistant said she felt something brush past her shoulder, cold, deliberate, and heavy. Afterward, Father Thomas declared that what haunted the family wasn't a traditional haunting at all. "It's parasitic," he said. "It feeds on emotion, fear, despair, conflict. As long as it can provoke those, it can stay." He instructed the family to stop reacting. No fear, no attention. Ignore it completely. For a few weeks, they tried. But how do you ignore something that speaks your name in the dark? By October, the situation deteriorated again. The children began fighting constantly. Rosa became ill, often bedridden with fatigue. Latoya reported hearing breathing sounds near her ear while trying to sleep. One night, she felt fingers brush her hair. When she turned, no one was there. Then came the incident that finally forced them to leave for good. On the night of October 29th, Rosa woke up to a crash in the kitchen. When she rushed in, she found every cabinet open, dishes shattered across the floor. The lights flickered, then went out completely. In the dark, a voice spoke. Not a whisper, not a shout, just a low, hollow voice that filled the entire room. "You shouldn't have dug." Rosa screamed for her daughter. Latoya ran in with a flashlight, and for a split second, both women saw the same thing, a tall, black mass standing near the refrigerator. It had no face, no form, but its outline absorbed light, as if the air itself bent around it. When the beam of light hit it directly, it vanished. That night, they left everything behind and didn't return. They moved into temporary housing provided by the church. For the first time in months, the house on Carolina Street stood empty again. But even after they left, the neighbors said lights still turned on at night. Some claimed to see a figure pacing in the windows. Others heard knocking sounds from the basement. The landlord eventually struggled to find new tenants. Every family that moved in left within weeks, complaining of strange noises, cold air, and the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Father Thomas personally visited the property one last time in late 2013. He walked through each room slowly, saying quiet prayers. In the basement, he paused and looked toward the spot that had once been dug up. There was no sign of damage now. The concrete had been repaired. But the priest later said he could still feel it. The weight, he called it. As if the ground itself remembered what had been there. He sealed the basement door with blessed oil and left without looking back. The house remains standing today. The landlord refuses to discuss its history. The police reports are still archived, sealed but traceable. And the family. They never spoke publicly again. Latoya changed her last name and moved to another state. Rosa passed away quietly 2 years later. But even now, locals swear that on certain nights, you can still hear faint knocks from the basement of the Carolina Street house. 3 knocks, always 3. And those who've dared to record inside claim their audio captures a faint, rasping breath beneath the silence. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear it say one thing: still here. If you're still here listening, don't forget to subscribe to Horror Night Stories, your home for true, documented horror, real events, real reports, and the chilling truth that sometimes reality is far darker than fiction. Like the video, comment what you think truly haunted that family, and share it with someone who'd never believe a haunting could be this real.